All right, guys, in this video, we have some exciting news to go over and talk about here. This is news that just recently dropped and has been causing a lot of interesting conversation, I guess is the way we can put it. That has to do with the initiative's Drew Murray leaving the Xbox first-party studio to then rejoin Insomniac Games. Now, it's not new that he left the initiative. We already knew about that. That's not news. But what is news is that he is rejoining Insomniac Games. He has worked on a lot of Insomniac game titles in the past, and he's pretty well known for that. He's a veteran developer, and I do remember that when we found out he was going to the initiative studio, it was kind of a big deal. And, you know, a lot of Xbox fans did make a big deal about it because it's like, oh, look, this is like a developer that has been known to produce mostly PlayStation games, although he did do Sunset Overdrive as well. And he's going to work at a, lead position over there at the initiative. And so it was kind of a big deal. And so people were like kind of surprised to see that he was leaving the initiative so soon. And he put out a string of tweets kind of explaining why he was leaving, but it seems to come as quite a surprise to many that he has announced today that he's rejoining Insomniac Games. So it says here, Drew Murray, longtime Insomniac Games developer, recently left his new home of Xbox first-party studio, The Initiative, but now we have learned that he has returned to the PlayStation Studios family, rejoining Insomniac Games as a principal designer. Announcing the news on Twitter, Murray rejoins the PlayStation Studios developer, where he stated that he is excited to be rejoining many friends and former colleagues. Drew Murray was with the studio from 2005 to 2015 and helped ship both Resistance 2 and 3, Xbox's Sunset Overdrive, and Ratchet & Clank Future Tools of Destruction. With Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales now out and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart about to release, we can make the assumption that Drew is working on the next big Insomniac game, whether it's Spider-Man 2 or something else. Drew Murray spent just over 2 years helping craft the initiative's reboot of Perfect Dark, and even appeared in the announcement trailer at the Game Awards before announcing his departure earlier this year. And so if you go over to his Twitter, he announced his departure on February 1st, and he said, after 2 wild years helping start the initiative at Xbox and rebooting Perfect Dark, it's time for me to say a tearful and bittersweet goodbye to my team at the initiative. It's been extraordinary working shoulder to shoulder with such a talented and experienced team, many of whom are great friends now, but my life outside of work needs more attention and headspace than I have been able to give it lately, so I'm stepping down from my role. Mystery surrounded the project when I joined the studio. I didn't know what kind of game it was. I didn't know it was going to be Perfect Dark, and I didn't know anyone on the team. 2 years later, we announced the franchise with a trailer that still gives me goosebumps. Most importantly, the team has the vision and talent to knock the game and franchise out of the park. My silver lining to all this is that I'm excited to join the screaming masses on Perfect Dark launch day to experience the game. So that is everything he said about his departure with the Initiative Studio over there at Xbox. Now, the big thing that people are getting very worked up about, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, and it just goes to show that there's just too much toxicity surrounding this stuff. There was toxicity when this was first announced from the PlayStation community as well as the Xbox community, and there is still toxicity surrounding this from both the PlayStation and the Xbox community, unfortunately. But what people are focusing on is the fact that he kind of said that he wants to focus on his life outside of work and that it needs more attention and more headspace than he's been able to give it lately. And, you know, the reason why this is kind of, led to toxic conversation is because there were PlayStation fans essentially saying, look at how terrible things are over there at Xbox and the initiative. This guy is leaving, so soon after joining. And, people kind of pushed back on that and they were like, no, dude, you're being, completely unreasonable right now. He's making it clear that he left because of, family reasons and personal reasons. And that's why I didn't talk about it at all, because I was like, yeah, like the dude, he just, he wants to go spend time with his family. And so that's why a lot of people are very surprised that he announced today that he's rejoining Insomniac Games, because it's basically been like 3 weeks. And so it does kind of change the entire perception of what exactly is going on here. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh, things are terrible over there at Xbox and the initiative, and things are just failing completely to the point where they're just going to start losing developers and it's doomed and it's on fire and everything's terrible, because I don't know that at all, right? Like, we really have no idea what's going on there at some of Xbox's studios. We don't know what's going on at the initiative. We just have this to look at, and I think it's totally reasonable and understandable now that he announced he's joining Insomniac Games so soon after leaving the initiative to kind of raise an eyebrow, maybe question, like, is it possible that things maybe aren't going as smoothly over there at the initiative as they should be? I think that's a fair question to ask. I just don't think it's fair to jump to any conclusions. So what I said is, it's pretty cool to see Drew Murray make his way back to Insomniac. I have no doubt that he did some great work for the initiative and the Perfect Dark reboot, but it's clear that he wanted to come back to his development home at Insomniac and PlayStation, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so rather than focus on the fact that he left the initiative, I'm more focused on the fact that he's with Insomniac now. And what's exciting about this is when you look at his past work, it does kind of point to him maybe doing something brand new for Insomniac, possibly returning to Resistance. It's been long rumored that a Resistance 4 or a Resistance collection of some sort has been in the works at Insomniac. One thing that we've learned about Insomniac is that they have a lot of projects that are being worked on at one time. So obviously we have Spider-Man 2 that's in the works, and there's definitely something on top of that. Who knows? Maybe it's Sunset Overdrive 2 exclusive to the PS5. Anything's possible, right? And so it does kind of get you excited to think about what is it that he's working on. Maybe he really didn't have any intention of rejoining Insomniac Games. I think that's another angle that a lot of people are not thinking about here. Like, maybe everything, I mean, there's no doubt that everything he said was true. He took 3 weeks to himself and his family. Maybe that's all he needed to kind of clear his head. I think we've all been there. We all need a vacation from time to time, but nobody seems to be considering the fact that maybe he had no intention of actually rejoining Insomniac. Maybe once they saw, on February 1st that he left, they're like, he's a free agent again. Let's go show him what we're working on, and maybe we can bring him back on board. And maybe that's exactly what happened. Maybe they're like, look, Drew, like, check out what we have in the works. Maybe you'll be interested in it. Maybe you'll want to come work on it. And maybe what he saw excited him enough to where he's like, yeah, I want to come back, it'll be exciting. I mean, he does stress the fact that he's with, former colleagues and friends, and that goes a long way. I mean, he was with them for 10 years. So I'm not going to sit here and say that this means that everything over there at the initiative is on fire and Perfect Dark is doomed and it's going to be terrible. No, I'm still excited to see what it's going to be like. I don't think that this is anything that serious, but it is always interesting when you see these high profile developers kind of go back and forth from these major studios, from these major publishers, because it always does make you question, like, is there more than meets the eye here? Is it as simple as he just wants to leave because he wants to leave, or are there maybe some concerning reasons why he's leaving? Maybe not. It's something. One thing we do have to note is this kind of stuff happens all the time. So to try to read into it too much, it's not really worth it, because you're probably never going to get the answer. At the end of the day, the answers kind of present themselves in how these games turn out. So like, if there are rumors or there are like murmurs that things are not going great behind the scenes, and then the game comes out and it's like, oh yeah, you can definitely tell that this game was basically a development nightmare and things fell apart. And then other times they come out and the games are perfect, and it's like you wouldn't even know if there ever was any trouble behind the scenes, right? So, we should just wait until we see Perfect Dark and judge it when we see it, and judge it for ourselves. I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and assume that everything there is fine and that the game's going to turn out fine. But there's no doubt that this is, as I said, a big win for Sony, a big win for Insomniac. And the biggest question that raises in my mind when I see this is not whether or not there's something going wrong at the initiative. It's, what is he working on now? Because clearly something enticed him to come back to Insomniac. So at this point, I'm going to ask you guys to leave your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you make of this situation? And what do you think Insomniac is working on outside of Spider-Man 2? Because that is something that I didn't really think of until I read that article, where it's like, yeah, Miles Morales is out. You know, Ratchet and Clank is pretty much done. It's going to be out in just a couple months. So clearly they're working on some big projects that are, you know, next in line. And there certainly has to be more than Spider-Man. So let me know what you think it is they're working on. Leave the video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon. And feel free to share the video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.